Hey, welcome back to the Unbelievable Podcast. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today we are talking about a devastating Week 1 performance by the Minnesota Vikings. Your Minnesota Vikings came out a little bit flat to open the season against the Green Bay Packers and subsequently went down 43 to 34 and now stand at 0 and 1, tied with the Detroit Lions at the back end of the division through one game. I know that's all very important through one game, and we shouldn't freak out too much. But there were some questionable things and some issues that may become more and more apparent as the season goes on. And our goal here today is to go into that kind of stuff. So Drew and I will be breaking down the Vikings loss to the Packers to the best of our ability. Take a look at some aspects that were specifically concerning, and also talk about the ways that the team can potentially turn this around and not have this become a 6-10. Keeping in mind, of course, we are only through 1 week, so that's the game plan for today's show. So let's just jump right into it here. So as you guys are all aware, the Vikings ultimately dropped this one 43 to 34. The final score was not really a good. It was not. It's not exactly what the game looked like. Let's just put it that way. Ultimately, the Vikings were able to put up about 24 points, and what you could argue to be garbage time in the fourth quarter. I mean, the Packers were playing lax defense basically for the last 15 minutes of the game. Ultimately, they got shelled. That's what happened yesterday. Aaron Rodgers threw the ball over the field. I believe Davante Adams set a team record for receptions with 14, and put that next to 156 yards and a couple of touchdowns. Vikings didn't allow, the Vikings didn't get an interception, they didn't get a fumble recovery, and they didn't get a sack. Nothing was good about the defense. So let's start there, why don't we?
Yeah.
Tell me about your first impression of the 2020 Vikings defense.
Well, first impression, that sucked. There's no way around that. And I remember the quote from Mike Zimmer sometime in the training camp, I believe, something along the lines of, like he said, I've never had a bad defense, and so I don't expect that to change, something like that. And, put that on the Old Takes Exposed Twitter account, right? Because so far that's not looking too great. Of course, I started the Vikings defense in a couple of fantasy leagues yesterday, so big fat zero right there. Actually, have negative points in one of them. So, but yeah, that's we kind of figured there would be some growing pains at cornerback, right? So I'm not that surprised by, what seemed like easy completions to a ton of them to Davante Adams, some of them to like Valdez-Scantling. Now, those deep balls, by the way, that Rodgers threw, I don't think there's any defense for a couple of those. So there's, to his credit, that Rodgers has, kind of declined, so to speak, the last couple of years, but those throws were dynamite. So I've got to give credit there. But what I still don't understand, and I would like an answer to this, I haven't found one, is why the Vikings continue to play that cushioned man coverage on third and medium situations, third and short, and then the Packers over and over in those scenarios hit that quick out route for 8 to 10 yards, and it did not seem like any type of stress was needed for Aaron Rodgers on those plays. So that's kind of, I understand the growing pains at cornerback. That's the one thing I would change, is get up in their face and make it a little more difficult, make them think about it. But then the ultimate number one kind of frustrating factor for me was no pressure at all from Yannick Ngakoue or Ifeadi Odenigbo. Now, Ngakoue hadn't been doing much even in Jacksonville, in practicing in training camp and whatnot, and so that's some of that is excused. Odenigbo kind of building up this hype, clearly, hinting at his frustration through social media accounts about the trade in for Ngakoue. You kind of have to perform, right, when you do that. And, the Vikings clearly missed Everson Griffin and Daniel Hunter because of that. Rodgers had all day to throw, was pressured only a few times in that game. And that's, really those are the two spots that I noticed there was a big problem, because that's where the Packers just absolutely destroyed the Vikings. It was just quick, easy completions. Rodgers was stress-free all day, had all the time in the world. And so the Vikings got owned specifically on the pass rush and then off-line of scrimmage at the defensive backs.
So I think you hit on the three biggest factors for the Vikings loss yesterday, right? Now, of course, it's a team game. You can argue a million different things. What went into this? If this could have happened, things would have changed this way. I'm not trying to get into butterfly effect with you. I'm trying to say that there are three things that I really blame this loss on. I think you hit on all three of them. Number one is Mike Zimmer. Okay. First of all, you're the head coach. You automatically are going to take the blame no matter what. But there is a very, very pertinent reason as to why it's Zimmer's fault, and that's the issue with the coverage that you were talking about. If you're Aaron Rodgers and you can throw that 8-yard, probably an 8-yard out, basically like with a flick of your wrist, you have to get up in their face on 3rd and 6 or less.
Yeah.
You have to. There isn't an excuse. Okay, I'll say this. There's an excuse for having that issue early in the game, right? You don't know what to expect. You're not assuming that Davante Adams is going to be running these short patterns because, one, you don't have a ton of experience with Matt LaFleur, and two, it's a completely different season with new playmakers. Now, the issue for sure is then there's no late game adjustments. The specific out route that I believe that is kind of playing in your mind when you were talking about the Davante Adams one on Holton Hill, I believe that one occurred late in the third quarter. That should not be happening. Like, once you've seen it happen to you, 8 times by Davante Adams alone? And this is keeping in mind, too, that Marquez Valdez-Scantling can't even catch the ball half the time. The Vikings could have.
We saw that on that one drop. I think that is that the only time they punted.
There's two big drops.
That drop, yeah. I think that was the only time they punted was that one on 3rd and medium where he was nobody within 10 yards of him, and he just dropped that little drag route. That was. I mean, the Packers receivers did not. So the route that Valdez-Scantling really won was against Dancer down the sideline for that touchdown. And Dancer said kind of after the game that, I should have been in his face more, been more physical at the line.
He also was there for that play,
right,
by the way.
That's what I'm saying.
He was in good position.
He was in good position. So there's, I don't want to say progress, but there is signs, that it'll turn into something. And I think
I agree.
This group will be a lot better next year. But there might be a reason for playing the cushion in those 3rd and medium situations. I don't know what it is, but I wonder how much that is.
I feel like that has to be an adjustment. That has to be an adjustment.
I don't know. Yeah, it has to be, right? Because
I don't have a reasoning for one way or the other.
Do the cornerbacks play off because that's what they're told to do, or is that their own decision to play off? I don't know what that is. And maybe Zimmer is telling them, or the co-defensive coordinators, Adam Zimmer and Andre Patterson, or whoever is in charge of the call, ultimately is maybe they're saying get up on line of scrimmage and they're just not. I don't know. We don't know that. But something has to give, because how many times can you get beat on that for a first down over and over in the game and just keep letting it happen? I am.
How much do you even put on the corners in that situation? When you're set up to fail, that's a coaching problem. So that, to me, whether Mike Zimmer was telling them to do it and they were simply ignoring it, or whether Mike Zimmer was calling plays that were not, in hindsight, I should say, not correct, that's on him, right? We got to hand him some piece of that pie of blame. The other two pieces are, like you said, the coverage, obviously. I mean, every single person in Minnesota knows the Vikings have a coverage issue at this point. But the real thing that was very concerning was what you brought up with Ngakoue. He got zero pressure. I'm talking nothing. And there was a couple of times where he was getting bullied. He was getting
the one snapper Rodgers had literally all day. I think he took 7 or 8 seconds, and it was against Bakhtiari, but Bakhtiari handled him easily. I think there was a 4-man rush, and how it was across the board. There's I think an extra offensive lineman there to maybe help out with someone that does get past the initial blocker, right? But Bakhtiari held Ngakoue there for 8 seconds on an island. And that's the type of thing. Now, Bakhtiari is an elite left tackle. Right. But you trade for a guy and sign him for $12 million, you're going to expect him after 8 seconds of time there to get to the quarterback to make a move there and get after him. So
how much with Ngakoue? So obviously I'm going to shit on him today because he was terrible, right? But how much is warranted? Right, the guy that he's been in the organization for 2 weeks.
We don't know the situation, so I don't know how long it takes to get acclimated to a new defense. I have no idea, and I will never know. I don't know how long or how much of camp, preseason, workout he was doing in Jacksonville prior, expecting that he was going to be. So is it ultimately zero? So then that's another part of this too, is how much football shape is he in? How ready for game is he? How much, how much time has he spent in pads, hitting people? Like, that's the thing. And maybe we shouldn't have expected him to even play. Like, maybe he should have just sat out and done the Santa Bradford in 2016, and come in strong week 2. So, but Odenigbo, I'm very disappointed in. I will say that.
There is a difference in snaps there too, just for what it's worth. I'm looking at the Pro Football Focus figures just because I know that, just for a reference standpoint, everyone loves kind of like that hard number. So Odenigbo's overall defensive grade was 45.2. Ngakwe's was 42.5. To put that in perspective for those of you who are not super familiar with PFF, that's very bad. That's substandard by a wide margin, right? And to give you
so
more
they have sort of a scale, right? Like, what is good? I think that 90 plus is elite, like 80 is above average or a solid or something. I think 60 is supposed to be average, or 60 to 70, something like that.
60 would put you in the yellow on their standard. So that would be kind of like the middle ground. Okay. Green is between 60. I believe it's in the mid 60s to the upper middle 70s. And then you get into that blue, which is the elite grade. And I believe that's just 90 and above. So just across the board relative to the rest of the league, Odenigbo and Ngakwe are pretty close to the very bottom. Definitely at the absolute bottom for a combination of two pass rushers, which is unacceptable. So Odenigbo played 60 snaps, and Ngakwe played 44, and you got nothing out of both those guys. That's simply unacceptable.
Shamar Stephen leads the Vikings with quarterback pressures this year. So there you go. There's the I think he got 2 of them, and there could have been many other players that got one because Rodgers was not pressured more than a handful of times in that game. So that's the 2 big things that what we've learned is that if those 2 positions, the pass rushing and then cornerback, we've talked all offseason about how important those positions are. If those 2 positions are hurting, the rest of your defense, no matter how star power is there, it doesn't matter. Harrison Smith cannot be all over the field at once. Eric Kendricks cannot be all over the field at once.
He gets pretty close, though.
He can get pretty close. There were a couple times where he made some sick plays.
For what it's worth, he did have an 88 coverage grade, which is elite by PFF standards.
But like how much that mattered. I mean, his team still gave up 40-plus points. And then, really, to me, it's that all that comes together on those third down plays where the Packers, one of the reasons I took the under on Rodgers' passing yards is because, Zimmer has kind of kept him in check in recent games. But B, I did not expect the Packers to have the ball the entire game. And Vikings just kept allowing third down conversion after third down conversion with that little out route, and it seemed like half the time. And so something you would have thought at halftime would have been changed, and nothing was really changed there. So I don't know. And it's tough. It's on the flip side, we're going to probably talk about the offense here too, but it's tough to even assess the offense because almost half the game, if not more than that, was garbage time. So, and then the fact in the first half, the Packers so dominated time of possession that the Vikings had, I think, 3 possessions of the ball.
5 passes in the first half for Kirk Cousins.
He had 5 passes. One was that really bad interception. And then you had the safety that, by the way, it was a great play by Jair Alexander. From the sounds of it, he kind of improvised on that and saw that he got a cue that it was either long developing play action or it was going to be a run. So he just bolted for the ball. So that was, great play by him. And that, as a Viking, with the Vikings, you can't really do anything about that. But anyway, I don't even want to assess the Vikings offense because I think the defense and how poor it was, especially on third down, really was the difference in this game. And I don't think that, I don't want to assess garbage time. And that's what the second half turned into.
You're right. The other piece with this defense, by the way, is the tackling. And that's kind of the one element here where I'm not concerned as a result, right? Because tackling was going to be a problem in week 1 for pretty much everyone. It was a problem if you watched the NFL yesterday, a lot of gross football, right?
I will add that I think I saw somebody say this yesterday too, but 2011 during the lockout year, the first few weeks of the year, terrible defense as well. So it's one of those where in a shortened off season or whatever the case may be, tackling defense seems to be hurt more than offense.
Okay, so this is also kind of worth pointing out, I suppose. The five worst coverage, or excuse me, the five worst tacklers for the Vikings yesterday: Cameron Dantzler, a rookie, at 37.9; Eddie Yarborough, I believe he's a second-year player, but very limited playing time, at 26.5; Holton Hill at 41.7; Jalen Holmes at 26.1. Both those guys being second-year players and first-year big-time play, in terms of playing snaps. And then Eric Wilson randomly just decided not to show up and not tackle for like the first time in his entire career with a grade of 31. So we look at these four issues, right, that we've elaborated on. We got Mike Zimmer, which a lot of you guys already think is, the principal issue as it is. You've got the coverage, which is pretty obvious. I think we are all expecting some growing pains. We didn't necessarily expect it to look like 4 touchdowns and 364 passing yards, but I think a lot of us expected that was not going to be good. Then you got the pass rush, which is going to be missing Danielle Hunter for at least 2 more weeks. Like, this isn't good. There's no immediate improvement coming here. These two guys that are playing right now, they both need to get better. And then you got the tackling issue. So from ranking those 4 things that made this essentially those 4 issues right there kind of created the time of possession disparity, right? And the inability for the Vikings offense to sustain drives only added to that, right?
But it was one 3 and out the Vikings had, really, right? There was the 1 3 and out, and then they got that stop on the goal line, which credit to the Vikings defense, but then things kind of turned after the safety
and handed the ball back.
Right. The safety at that bad field position with the great play by Alexander really turned things around, plus the interception. So it kind of, that second quarter really sort of, things moved quickly for the Vikings. And but moving forward, that pass rush, I think, is going to be the big thing, right? Because
I would agree.
Last year, I think this defense somewhat got accustomed to playing without that shutdown cornerback, caliber play from the cornerbacks, right? And you overcame that with a good pass rush. Griffin and Hunter were probably the most efficient duo pass rushing in the league last year. The Smiths and Green Bay would have something to say about that. There's a couple other duos as well, but Hunter and Griffin were awesome. And the Vikings will not have Griffin all year, will not have Hunter for at least 3 games. You have to make up for that somehow. And I don't know if I think Arif Hassan pointed out that the Vikings in neutral situations, right? When it's like not garbage time, the Vikings did blitz more to maybe try and make up for that. But they got to figure something out because Odenigbo didn't get home at all. And Ngakoue didn't get home at all. These guys, there was hardly any pressure on Aaron Rodgers, and that's just a bad recipe against that quarterback. So I don't know what the plan is in the future. I don't expect anything to get much better with the cornerback position just because of lack of depth, the youth. It reminds me last year of the Cowboys game. Vikings somehow got away with a win there due to some terrible game management by Jason Garrett at the end there. But, the Vikings did not play like good quarterbacks last year. And that maybe has, affected our perception of this defense. You played David Blau and Chase Daniel and Matt Moore, who, by the way, the last 2 they actually lost to. You play against some of these quarterbacks that can maybe change your perception of the team. And so maybe, this slate for the Vikings this year, there's a lot of good quarterbacks on that schedule. Aaron Rodgers being one of them. So I am not optimistic. I kind of figured something like this was possible. I didn't expect 43 points to be scored, clearly. But this is not promising for sure.
522 total yards, by the way. That I believe, don't quote me on this because I have not fact checked it, but I believe that's the most allowed in the Zimmer era.
It is second most because the other one is Rams 2018.
Okay.
The Jared Goff game. So that's the other way to kind of spin this positively is when Mike Zimmer gets freaking owned like that, it doesn't happen twice in a row. So
that's a good point.
That's one way to spin it, right? So I think the other game is that Rams game, and then they bounce back against the Eagles the next week. The other one I thought of was Seattle 2015. The next week they went to Arizona on Thursday night and almost got a win when they had almost all their guys hurt. So that's my weird memory coming into play here. So,
all right. So I think we can all agree that this one's on the Vikings defense, but of course, this is a team game, and the Vikings offense did contribute to the mostly mediocre play up until what you want to consider to be garbage time. Obviously, that's a little bit subjective. I know that there's,
Yeah.
objective figures to determine a neutral field, but it certainly felt like garbage time, like what, 5-10 minutes into the third quarter, and that's really when the Vikings offense turned it on. So, keeping in mind what you said before, that we're kind of evaluating garbage time here. You don't get a truly good perspective of where the Vikings offense stands. For example, Kirk Cousins is rated as the number 6 quarterback right now in the NFL, according to PFF. And again, take PFF grades for what you want, but they're a pretty good baseline. And Kirk Cousins did not play the football of the number 6 NFL quarterback yesterday, straight up. So small sample size, a lot of contributing factors here, but there are some things to like, right? Like Adam Thielen being healthy for an entire football game. He caught 8 passes, I believe, for 111 yards.
It was
He
a
was
lot.
getting
It
open.
was, yeah.
He was
And
beating their best guys. I mean, he was running excellent routes. He was on the inside and the outside. He was doing all the things that we got excited about. When they traded Diggs, we all said Adam Thielen needs to do this, and that, and then we can make up for it with another, a rookie wide receiver like Justin Jefferson or Olabisi Johnson. Adam Thielen did that yesterday.
Yes, he did. That's another positive to look at. Adam Thielen is still there. He can be the number 1, and he showed up with Diggs not there, which is something I was a little bit concerned about. Is that Thielen's production in the past with Diggs hurt, for whatever reason, Diggs may have been hurt, is that Thielen's production has dropped quite a bit in the past. And we're off to a good start there. Now, again, those 2 long touchdowns were garbage time. But there's something to be said there about him being, there's a lot of trust there between Kirk and Thielen. I fully believe that. I think really offensively, I just go to a couple plays that really changed the whole thing. And that interception by Kirk is absolutely one of them, because that handed the Packers 7 points before halftime. You had of course, the safety where Jair kind of guessed that. That's just a great play by Jair. I don't know. Maybe you can argue at the play call, doing a long developing play action play inside your own 5.
That's questionable.
But also don't anticipate the cornerback just completely breaking off his assignment to go after the quarterback there. So, and then so you got those 2 plays. And I'm trying to think. I just had a third one in mind and I already forgot it. So I don't know what it was right now. But I'm going to add this to Kirk Cousins, a scrambler. That's another positive spin to this. But I don't know. I don't want to assess too much of this because it was so much of garbage time that I don't even want to take it too seriously.
How much can you take away from the fact that other than Adam Thielen, the rest of the Vikings offensive, they're studs, if you will, pretty quiet for the most part. I mean, Dalvin Cook, of course, scored, what's the opening drive or the second drive? And then later had a second touchdown as well. And he had, a couple sizable gains, but no breakaway, Dalvin Cook running, away from the defense in this game. BC Johnson had a couple nice catches, one very significant one downfield. But other than that, I mean, what Kyle Rudolph had the one significant catch and then the garbage time catch. Justin Jefferson, I mean, if you blinked, you didn't see him on the field at all. Irv Smith had 1 catch for 11 yards. I mean, all these guys that I think most of us were expecting, at the very least, to get more volume out there. And as you worry, would then, transfer to being production, right? But other than Adam Thielen, no one really jumps out at you. Now, some of this is what we've been talking about, where the offense wasn't able to get in any sort of rhythm, and it's basically impossible to evaluate any sort of future performance based off it, because this was just an outlier, if you will, especially in the first half. 5 passes, 5. That's not going to happen again probably this season, and maybe not for a while. So it's difficult to evaluate the overall volume numbers of this team. But I think as a whole, other than Adam Thielen, you have to be somewhat disappointed that you didn't get much from your playmakers, with the exception to the 2 short touchdowns that Cook scored.
Well, I think I saw a lot of people saying like the offensive line is bad or this and that. I didn't think so.
I didn't either.
I thought the offensive line was solid. the Alexander safety is just, I don't know if I blame that on the offensive line. Now, there may have been a missed assignment. I'm not in the locker room to speak on that. But the run, it seemed to me like the running game was efficient. Alexander Madison had some large carries in there. Dalvin was just fine. I think really you have the interception, you have the safety, and then you have that 4th and 3. This is the third play I was trying to remember. The 4th and 3 where they threw it down the field to Tajay Sharp.
Oh.
When on the other side of the field, Adam Thielen is a single coverage. Like those 3 plays to me are just like everything besides that was pretty darn solid. I think offensively, it was just those 3 plays I didn't like.
We got to talk about that one play because that was the dumbest play call ever, especially for the situation too, right? So of course, don't throw the ball 40 yards downfield when you only need 3 yards, right? Yeah. Like of course, for sure. Secondly, don't make that your first read for sure, right? That's the only place Kirk Cousins looked. Thirdly, don't even call that play in that situation. You need to get the offense you need to keep them on the field. Like I was so pissed about that one play.
Yeah, and you're still pissed.
I am, because it's so ridiculous, especially if Gary Kubiak too. Like how many times has this dude ran it for a first down on 3rd and short? Like I would have had less of a problem with that than throwing it 40 yards downfield I think the safety had gone over to the other side of the field. So you're throwing single coverage to a guy who's barely 6 feet, probably played smaller than that.
Yeah, the thing about that is Tajay had played like virtually almost no snaps in that game. And so you throw him out there. It was reminiscent of Aldrick Robinson before he became a factor in the Vikings offense at 2018, right? You just throw him down the field and throw him deep, but it's not like Tajay Sharp is some deep route specialist. And so I don't know, that was concerning. I didn't love that. And like you said, I would have preferred a little draw play for Dalvin or something like that on 4th and 3, because it seems like that's more likely to be picked up than Tajay Sharp 40 yards down the field trying to make a catch.
Or just slants. Run 4 wide receivers and a couple curls and a couple slants. Someone's probably going to be open against. Their secondary is not any good either. I don't get it. Okay, we'll get off of that one. I want to go back to the offensive line, because I do think what you said before about the offensive line taking a lot of heat when they weren't as bad as I think the general public
like to use them as a scapegoat, and most of the time it's deserved. But I think Riley Reef didn't allow pressure. I think O'Neal allowed 1 sack early on and then was pretty solid. Yep. I think Bradbury was a lot better than most of the games last season. I think Elflein was really the guy that the one poor performer, if I remember looking at, trying to remember some of the pressures that were allowed. I think Elflein was kind of the culprit for most of them. But other than that, I think the rest of the unit was pretty solid.
So you've got, according to PFF, right? So take it for whatever you will. Brian O'Neill is in the good range. You've got Garrett Bradbury, Riley Reef, and Pat Elflein in the average range to very close to the subpar range. And then you've got Dakota Dozier at completely unacceptable range, but his pass blocking is good. Now, what's interesting here, and I think this confirms what I thought I was seeing on TV, it was not the offensive line, it was the guy assigned to pick up that extra rusher coming off the edge, right? So we talked about in the pregame show that they're going to run a 3-4, right? The front 5 is in charge of not just those 3 guys up front, but also a pass rusher that's going to come off the edge. It's probably going to be Zadarius Smith or Preston Smith. It was Zadarius Smith more often than not yesterday, and the guy who was in charge of picking him up sucked every single time yesterday, okay? Alexander Madison, 26.9 pass blocking grade, right? That's really not good. Kyle Rudolph, 29. Dalvin Cook, 31. Those are your 3 primary guys who are picking up blitzers or in a 3-4 scheme. Not even necessarily a blitzer, just a guy that's got his hand in the dirt that you weren't expecting to be there when he came to the line of scrimmage. Anyways, the offensive line was fine. It wasn't good. I'm not excited about what the Vikings offensive line did yesterday. I am a little bit excited about what Garrett Bradbury did, just because he set the bar so low last year on a couple occasions. So it was nice to see the pass blocking numbers go up, especially because generally when you see a jump in pass blocking performance, it probably means that they added some beef to their body. They're not getting bull rushed as much, which of course is something that we would like to see from Garrett Bradbury coming in as a bit of an undersized interior offensive lineman. So the offensive line was but it was the guys that were in charge of backing up the offensive line that really were the problem. And that's on, I know we didn't give Dalvin Cook $63 million. Well, I know the Vikings didn't give Dalvin Cook $63 million to pass block. But if you're going to get paid that big money, you're expected to be all purpose, right? He was not all purpose yesterday. And, am I wrong to criticize Dalvin Cook for doing anything other than, running the football? Because during the Adrian Peterson era, I mean, we seem to turn a blind eye to his inability to catch the ball and his inability to pass block.
It. Now
I don't do that with Dalvin Cook too. I'm not going to do that.
Right. I think. Well, I was too young to even in Peterson's prime, right? Like, the 2000s, like early 2010s. In his prime, I didn't even understand the game enough to be like, well, that was a bad pass blocking rep,
right?
Right. But then as I got into Peterson's last couple of years in Minnesota, like 2015 specifically, that was when he won the rushing title, and you saw. He got all those carries because Norv Turner force fed him, right? But it was awful watching him try and block, and which is why he had to be pulled out of the game on third down so often, and why he, throughout his career, if you think about it and you watch past games, it happened all the time. He was pulled out of the game on third down because he couldn't catch the ball reliably, and he couldn't block. I don't know. Now, Dalvin is a receiver, far and away a better receiver than Adrian Peterson ever was. The pass protection thing is yet to be seen. And there are few running backs that are actually good at all three of those things, receiving, pass blocking, and then, of course, carrying the football. There are a lot of, you see those third down specialists, so to speak, running backs that come in because they're good at those two things, receiving and blocking, but maybe don't have that in between the tackles running ability. I hope Dalvin can at least be serviceable as pass blocker. I think
for what it's worth, this has never been something that I've pointed to before and been like, this guy sucks at pass blocking. It was just yesterday. It wasn't particular.
Well, I think it's fair to do when you offer the extension. You bring up a good point there about the extension. This isn't something that's a huge deal for a guy that's may or may not be on the team in the next year, and someone that's being paid. I don't know what his salary was this year prior to the extension, but now you've committed all these dollars to this guy. You better hope he's serviceable and multifaceted and able to do different things. So, and Dalvin Cook is still a superstar player. He's a top 5 runner of the football. Great receiver as well. The pass blocking is to be seen yet. It's not off to an awesome start in his career, I would say. But in terms of other running backs, comparing him, he's up there and deserves the payday. It's just you don't want that to be something that you have to rely on as his pass blocking ever, which is, that's where we're at with this is the ultimate problem with paying running backs. We've gotten into this discussion now, and I didn't really want to do that today, but the ultimate discussion with paying running backs is they can be replaced so easily. And so I didn't love the extension there, but anyway, we're off track here. The Vikings defense ultimately, to me, is the reason to blame, or is the culprit of this loss because of the third down conversions over and over and over and over being allowed throughout the game.
I'm not ready to push the Dalvin Cook sucks at pass protection narrative just yet, but I do want to keep a mindful eye on that moving forward, just because that was a disaster yesterday. It wasn't just, I guess it wasn't just him either. Madison was trash too, but anyways, something to keep an eye on, something that you may not have heard on some other show, right?
Kirk, when he was when the game was still in the balance, the protection and the run blocking too. Run blocking was solid, right? Throughout in those games or in those moments, and I think Kirk had plenty of time when the game was still in the balance. I just think you have probably 4 or 5 drives to work with here before the game's out of hand because the defense just didn't stop anything yesterday, and then you had, of course, the absolute worst time to go 3 and out, and then the really bad interception that was pretty much, to me, the only flaw in Kirk's game yesterday, with the exception, depending on the decision making on that 4th and 3, if you want to blame that on him, or maybe that was the hot read. I don't know what the call is, but other than that, Kirk threw accurate balls. He led that solid first drive for a touchdown. It's just some things unraveled quickly for the Vikings. I think it was sort of spearheaded and sparked by the defense just not getting any stops.
Right. I was just gonna say, we typically start these shows by evaluating the quarterback for the Vikings, and honestly, like the evaluation that you just gave right there is pretty much is what it is right now, because it's hard to, as we've said multiple times, it's hard to evaluate this performance in any other context other than the one we saw it in. And realistically, I don't foresee that context ever, at least this season, I don't foresee it happening again. I don't think the Vikings are going to have a time management issue consistently throughout the season. That's not a major takeaway for me in terms of being concerned. One thing that I will say, and I thought this was an interesting point, in our Climbing the Pocket group chat or whatever, Eric Eager, who works at PFF, said that his opinion was that the Vikings offense wasn't bad yesterday. It's just the organization of how the game kind of transpired was the real issue, right? Like the Vikings 3 and outs came at the wrong time, and they weren't holding on to the ball at the right time. But if you reorganize their drives, it might look a lot better, right? Which is something to keep in mind. I thought it was kind of a good point.
Here's the thing: we could talk about the offense however we want. Like this offense has a ceiling, right? And I think you're not going to get 50 points in a game, scoring on every drive. That's just not happening, in my opinion. And so you're going to have to get enough stops in your defense, and the Vikings just weren't going to get them yesterday. So we can talk about the offense, but I just don't think it would have mattered if the Vikings had, those couple of drives maybe that, let's say Kirk doesn't throw that interception. Let's say, they convert that 4th and 3 and score. I don't know if the Vikings defense would have stopped the Packers anyway. I think Packers just maintain that lead and they keep scoring, because I don't see a stop happening in any universe at that point.
I don't think there's many people listening to this show that would disagree with you on that, and I'm not going to either. All right, so with all that said, we've kind of given an overview of both sides. I think we've made it clear that the two of us are at least putting this one on the defense, and multiple different aspects of the defense, which doesn't bode well moving forward. But, again, it's just week 1. No reason to panic just yet. It's not a good loss. Honestly, it's a very bad loss in the grand scheme of things, but we can still.
It's the Packers. It's the Packers. It's an NFC North rival. That matters a lot. And it's not like, these next 3 games are all against AFC South opponents. Those losses will matter much less. I'm not saying they'll lose all 3, but I'm saying if they do, they will matter much less than this one. This one matters a lot. This is so many people talked about last season, the missed opportunity about getting a first-round bye and all this stuff because of the division games. And you come out right away this season and do that. It's not great. It's not great. Packers have owned Minnesota in the last three games. Owned them.
Yeah. It's not looking good in that regard. But all right, so let's wrap this thing up. Then give me your 3 major takeaways here from this game. Things that you're worried about carrying over, things that you saw that might give some indication as to what we may see in the future here, or just something that caught your eye, caught your attention, and you think is worthy of going over here.
I'll keep these short and sweet. Number 1, pass rush has to get there. Very much missing Daniil Hunter and Everson Griffin, Ngakoue and Ifeadi Odenigbo, and whoever else steps in there. Defensive end has to be more efficient. Number 2 is the cornerback situation. I don't think it's going to get much better, but I don't know if there's a way to just. I want to see that at the line of scrimmage. I'd rather make the quarterback beat you with a perfect fade down the sideline, right, than an easy, quick timing route that isn't disrupted at all. So that's the next takeaway, and I would like, and I'm no football coach, but it seems like that's something you want to mix into your defensive packages, is a little bit of, throwing off some timing at the line of scrimmage. And then number 3, Adam Thielen is still elite. There's no doubt about that. He put up another big day. Now, granted, a couple of times maybe you could argue, especially that second one, garbage time, that second touchdown. But the guy still runs fabulous routes, still has the most reliable hands, maybe in the league. So he's still there, and that's the one positive spin I have on this game, which was otherwise very not fun to watch.
All right, so of course I agree with the notes that you made. The pass rush and the coverage are the very obvious points here. So I'll add a couple. I'll add something unique into the mix. Right, number 1, Cameron Dantzler had a very solid performance for his first game in the NFL, especially considering the circumstances. No preseason action, Basically, I believe
Yeah.
he was actually the starter. He wasn't listed as the starter, but he was the first.
He was
one
out
of
there on the
first two.
first. Yep, I think so.
So he was thrown into the fire, and his coverage was not perfect. Obviously, a lot of us will remember him getting, quote, burned by Valdez Scantling on that, pass down the seam. But overall, he was in position, right? And that's 90% of the battle as a cornerback. Now you just got to get him to turn his head around. And hopefully it doesn't take 5 years like it took Trey Waynes, right? So good first impression for me from Cameron Dantzler. On the flip side to that, not a whole lot of Jeff Gladney, right?
He didn't play. Yeah, he didn't play, which was weird. That was weird. Right. I don't know if there's. You'd think in a game like that where the corners are getting toasted, maybe throw him out there. Maybe try it. Yeah.
How much worse could it really get? Other things here. Aaron Rodgers, really good at football still, by the way.
Yeah.
I think I'm part of this problem, but a lot of us have talked about the slow winding decrease of Aaron Rodgers' talent. Well, it's still there, and
the throw to Adams on the right side of the end zone there. I think it was the near side of the top. That was I haven't seen much zip on that's probably a 30 or 35 yard pass in the air. I haven't seen that much zip on a ball like that in a while. That was a throw that made me go wow. And you can have that touchdown if you can throw that ball. Like, that's fine. There's no defense for that.
Yeah. It was right on the sideline too. I mean, of course, everyone's just screaming, "There's no way! There's no way!" And obviously, there is no way, except if it's Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
In part 3 here, we dragged on Dalvin Cook a little bit for signing the big contract extension and not being a superstar in every aspect of his game. How about Anthony Harris? Vikings just paid him a lot of money. He got roasted yesterday. Roasted. It wasn't just the cornerbacks. It was Anthony Harris too. And the tackling for him too, unacceptable, right? I mean, you just asked. This is a guy who just got franchise tagged. He's asking for a huge contract. We all agree that he deserves it based off of what we saw last year. He can't start this year like that. It's the same argument for Dak Prescott, right? You're going to take the franchise tag. You're going to gamble on yourself. Well, you better play damn well. Otherwise, that contract exception, it might not come. So Anthony Harris, not good enough. And again, we could say that for just about every guy on defense not named Harrison Smith and Eric Kendricks. Anthony Barr wasn't good enough for his contract. Shamar Stephen might be the best game that I've ever seen him play, but I don't think he's particularly good. Mike Hughes, first-round pick, not good enough. Jaleel Johnson, definitely not good enough. Again, that should be the title of this episode, not good enough, because that's what the Vikings defense was yesterday. And that's my final takeaway. So we'll wrap the show up on that. My optimism has not been completely deflated, but there are some things here where if we get to week 2 and we see the same issues with pass rush and coverage.
Here's the thing.
This is gonna be a long
Vikings get Phillip Rivers week 2. All right. That's a get right game. If you can't figure some, out against Phillip Rivers, after especially after what happened week 15 last year, you don't figure that out, then I'll be concerned. Because you know who's coming the next 2 weeks? You got the Titans, who are in the AFC Championship game last year, and I have very high expectations for. And then you have probably a top 5 quarterback in the NFL in Deshaun Watson the following week. So that could be, if you don't win next week, 0-4 looks very realistic to me.
All right. I hope you didn't just speak that into existence, but I have nothing to say. I live with a Packers fan right now, and I just walked home and I was like, I got nothing to say. It wasn't good enough. I don't know. So hopefully next week we'll be having, it'll be a different discussion, more spirited in a different way, if you will. But until then, make sure to check out the rest of the Climb in the Pocket Network. Check out Daily Norseman, of course. They're always have a ton of great content.
And we'll be back Thursday.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's a good point. Yeah. I believe I did mention this before, but we are to 2 episodes a week now. If you're listening to this on Tuesday, great. Then you know that we're dropping on Tuesday, but Thursday is the other day. So you can expect our Colts preview of Phillip Rivers, who Drew just brought up a couple moments ago, and the rest of the Colts team.
Lost to the Jaguars.
Yeah, they did lose to the Jaguars. All right, folks. Thanks for listening. We will catch you next week or later on this week. Why am I still talking? I'm going to stop recording.